In 1976, the British government attempted to criminalise the Republican movement by moving Republican prisoners of war to the H Block and tried to force them to wear a convict's uniform. They refused, and so began the blanket protest. In March 1978, attacks on Republican POWs by the Screws and the Loyalists eventually led them to refusing to leave their cells and, in turn, being refused visits to wash themselves in. A few months later, tired of the treatment and relentless abuse, the men destroyed their cells, furniture, refusing to leave after the damage was done. Unable to clear the cells, wardens left prisoners trapped in small rooms. And as a result, what had previously been only a blanket protest morphed into a dirty protest. In Armagh Jail, the first Republican POWs held a no work protest in support of the men in Long Kesh. Having already been able to wear their own clothing, the women refused in any order to work that came from the Screws. On 7th of February 1980, the women decided to escalate the protest and began a dirty protest. Three of the ladies would later join the 1980 hunger strike. By the end of the hunger strike, 10 men had tragically died. We believe it's due to the British intransigence, but it was later revealed by Richard O'Rourke in the book Blanketmen that there was a deal on the table which was rejected by Adams' leadership that would have been acceptable to the POWs and could have saved Joe McDonnell's life and prevented 5 other murders who followed him from dying as well. At an RNU event in the gas yard, Derry City Brenton Duddy declared for the first time that he was the infamous go-between for the IRA and Thatcher's government called Mountain Climber. He too supported Richard's claim that there was a deal on the table after 4 men had perished on hunger strike. H Block Murders Roll of Honour. Bobby Sands, aged 26, Irish Republican Army, died on the 5th of May 1981 after 66 days without food. Francis Hughes, aged 25, Irish Republican Army, died on the 12th of May 1981 after 59 days without food. Raymond McCreish, aged 24, Irish Republican Army, died on the 21st of May 1981 after 61 days without food. Patsy O'Hara, aged 23, Irish National Liberation Army, died on the 21st of May 1981 after 61 days without food. Joe McDonnell, aged 30, Irish Republican Army, died on the 8th of July 1981 after 61 days without food. Martin Hurson, aged 29, Irish Republican Army, died on the 13th of July 1981 after 46 days without food. Kevin Lynch, aged 25, Irish National Liberation Army, died on the 1st of August 1981 after 71 days without food. Kieran Doherty, aged 25, Irish Republican Army, died on the 2nd of August 1981 after 73 days without food. Thomas McAwee, aged 23, Irish Republican Army, on the 8th of August 1981 after 62 days without food. Michael Define, aged 27, Irish National Liberation Army, died on the 20th of August 1981 after 60 days without food.
Stop him! Pokey! Stop him! Pokey! Stop him!
12 years in June, 15th of June 1977, and I was about a week before my 20th birthday, and I went straight on the blanket. Well, landed at the reception in H5. They handed me a bundle of bedclothes, all neatly folded in a uniform, and I says I wasn't wearing that. So, and I just dropped them on the ground, and they gave me a few slaps. But then they had got well used to the Republicans going on and doing that. So it was just a matter of a few slaps and punches, and you were thrown down on an empty cell. The cells was nice and clean. There were everything about them. There was the furniture and stuff like that. And then I was put on this cell with a guy called Baylis Boyle from Belfast. I think he was from the markets or something like that. And at that time there was, as I say, we were in clean sales and stuff like that there. It was normal, and the screws were still coming around giving out hammers and stuff like that. They were still thingies. And then I was moved from Bailiff's Boy, was put on the cell with Sam Marshall from Lurgan. I was in the cell with him for a while. And things just went on in that vein. Sam was a great guy. And everything else, but the next thing I knew was told I was moving, and I was moved to H4. And I was put on the cell with by Tom McElwee. And Kieran Nugent was in the cell next to us. Kieran Nugent. And him and Big Tom would have had a few barneys going between the pipe arguments and stuff like that and everything else, and they were always, their talk was always about smoking fags, getting the fags in. Big Tom was a master smuggler and stuff like that. And as going out and visits and stuff then, it started getting bad and stuff like that. We were getting hammers and biddings. There was one time I was coming back from a visit and a screw was trying to put his hands down my throat. I had him and I got a wild bad hammer and was put in the boards and was brought back again. And as I say, I was in the cell with Tom. And then I was decided when Brent and the Dark Hughes came on and stuff like that, and Tom and Bobby and the others decided we weren't knowing Lemons at this time. They had decided to escalate the protests, and we had smashed their cells, wrecked the cells, smashed the windows, threw the furniture out and stuff like that, and it started to escalate from there. And gradually then we went into what we became famously known as the Winter of 78, where we were waking up in the morning and the snow was coming on the Monday. You were snow actually in your bed sheets and stuff like that. And we had, as I say, we had sponge mattresses lying on the ground. You would have had to prop them up against the walls during the day because of condensation. Of course, we were concrete floors. Underneath them was sunk, and you were hopping parts off them to use as toilet paper and stuff like that. Because any toilet paper we did get was getting used for letter writing and stuff like that. And only for the heating pipes, the two pipes which went along, you had the window, and the big cell window, the famous concrete bars, and underneath it ran two big thick heating pipes. And that's what saved men's lives. That they had actually were set up their beds up against, up during the day, they would have folded the sponge up, and they would have set up against them, they would have put the blankets around them or stuff like that. Guys even made sleeping bags where they wrapped the cover in the mattress,
Yeah.
and put the blanket on side and got inside and turned it into a sleeping bag. But of course the screws caught and all that, and they started taking these things away and stuff like that. We used to communicate by the gap between the thing. Some genius discovered, unbelievably, with the plastic, or we drank out of plastic mugs, or thingy was plastic, or this guy had discovered that when they were putting the blocks together, as I say, everything was concrete and it just fitted together. But this genius had discovered that the plug holes where they actually put the hooks or the cranes through or whatever, the chains through, they left them. There was a hole in every, you know what I mean? Mm. And it was full of concrete. And he managed to debatter this lump out. So left, he had and it didn't take much to bit it out. No, we had a plastic mug.
Yeah.
So you were left with this hole where we were only passed things away up the line. But of course the screws weren't long getting rid of that. But then you had the pipes, and you were able to talk through the pipes. Sometimes you were able to cut the bits of the pipe away with a plastic spit or fork or something like that you kept, and cut through so you could slip check racks with letters written on toilet paper, pass them up the wing, and maybe even cigarettes in some case, or else you would have swung messages out the window. tied them on a bit of string or rope or whatever, and made from the blankets, and swung them from cell to cell, and shot them across the wing underneath the doors, shot them across the wing. The guys doing this were masters at it. You know what I mean? They were marksmen that shooting things on the doors. It was unbelievable how good they were. But as I say, we went on the winter of 78, and it was coming up to Christmas. Now, and being on the sail with Pól Mac Adaim, Tom was a great guy. He was a big man, he was a country man, he was lean, he was like one of those, built like one of those cage fighters. No, and he had big fists and stuff like that. Tom was a hard man, like, but he hated bullies. And he hated the screws and blanket orderlies. And you know what a blanket orderly is. It's somebody would have been in for a crime like paedophilia or the scum of the scum or loyalists. But we even had our own men, like a boy called Tommy Murphy from Derry, who was on for provo charges, who had informed the barracks and stuff like that there, which was no big shame. Guys broke in the barracks and stuff like this. But this guy, he decided to go the whole hog, and he became a blanket orderly. He wasn't only a guy. There's another boy, Prince McCarthy from Belfast, who is now a Sinn Féiner, believe it or not. They had become the servants to the screws. They'd done the dirty work, hosing down. Tommy Murray, he was notorious for sticking hoses on windows and all. You know, as I say, when there was no time, he'd hose the guys down in their cells and stuff like that. In fact, we were even told he changed his religion. But this day, as I say, being on the cell with Big Tom, I was just, you knew you were due a battering at least a week, because Tom just couldn't keep his fists to his side, like. He was always punching. So, a screw or a blanket or like. But one famous occasion I remember was Tom loved his tea. Even though times how you were getting it, you knew it had been contaminated or something. No tasted it, it's just a salt and stuff like that. But Tom loved his tea, and he used to come round with a trolley, like the hospital, a big metal trolley with all the stuff on it. They'd hand you in your food. This guy would hand you in your food, more or less, nearly throw it at you and stuff like that. And then a big urn where they filled up my mug. This is the type of thing they done. And they half filled Tom's. And Tom says to the guy, the blanket orderly, fill it up. And your man looked at him. This dumb blank look that says there's nothing behind my fucking eyes. Right? Looked at him. And Tom says to him, now, when Tom gave you this look like this, Tom had a look of a death stare. And Tom gave him this death stare, and he says, fill it up. And the screw slammed it over his fist, pushed him into his fist. So Tom said, I gave him half of my hands, we shared it out, right? And Tom was sitting there with a fuming. He was fuming, you could see him. And everything else. So, when we finished our meal, if you would call it a meal, normally you put your dishes at the door, and the guy comes round, leans in, lifts them out, puts them on the thing. Tom said to him, put the two mattresses up, and I knew what was going to happen, and there was no stopping it, like. And he put the dishes in the middle of the thing, like. You hear the screws coming around, you hear the rattle of the trolley, and rattling away in the cup, all the dishes and stuff, you hear they're coming, and you knew that was a bidding and making its way towards us. You just knew what was going to happen. Tom stood at the window, up at the window, and waited. And the door opened, and the guy looked in, and he seen the dishes in the middle of the thing, and he says, put them at the door. And Tom says, you want them, you get them yourself. The screw knew what was going on, right? Being a statistic bastard that they were, he knew what was going on, but so he pushed this, going to get them dishes, right? Your man bent down, he lifted up the dishes, and Tom was just like a cat. He sprang on him like a cat. A fucking uppercut, right? And your man went flying backwards. And I don't know how he done it, he seemed to crawl on his elbows out of the fucking cell, right? And then the thing, then the door slammed. 10, 15 minutes. and the door busted open and they came in and we got a white hammer. An atrocious hammer and straight to the boards over a mug of half a cup of tea. You're right. But that was Big Tom. So anyway, coming up to Christmas, this was a week before Christmas. I'll never forget it. So Christmas is always, even through all the good Christmases and stuff like that, it's always remained for me, was the Christmas 1978. And I always remember who's number one because of it. Right? Although we had never heard records or music or unless the Screws was down it. But we were doing a wine shift, the force waxing that started then. With the big beers, we were faulty and we were putting their screaming on the wall and stuff. And the Screws was moving us to a clean wine, which they had hosed it down and put disinfectant on the cells and cleaned it up. You know what I mean? It wasn't that they didn't paint it around, they just waxed the walls down with power hoses and stuff like that. And then they started moving us over, but this was normal until they had started force waxing us. Now what they would do was they would beat you down over a mirror so they could look up inside you. Then they would shave you, for trying to force shave you and stuff like that, and stick you in a bath. Now depending what sick they were or whatever, I would have been either a freezing cold bath or a scalding hot bath, and they would have scrubbed you with one of them old wooden scrubbing brushes. Yeah. They would have scrubbed you with them and stuff like that. They would have tore the skin of your thing, my bodies and stuff like that. We sat in the stingray and you could hear the men getting run down the, or further on down, getting out of their cell doors opening. So was everything listening, they're sitting there like us two, and you're listening. And you could hear doors, keys rattling, doors opening, the heavy boots, the bare feet, running, the pain and the punches, you could hear fuss hitting bare skin and slaps, like that, stuff like that. And away they went, and Tom says, fuck this, I'm heading back. We're going to get battered anyway, I'm heading back. So I knew the inevitable, like there was no choice. So they came anyway, they actually missed a few cells and came straight to our cell. I remember that. Because this is right, there's still a few cells away. Next thing the cell door opened and they pounded on, dragged us out, run us down the line, across a circle, and of course he passed all these Screws, the guys with the white shirts, the men in charge, the PO and the SO and all this here, on the other wing. And they forced us down these plastic seats that you would see in dentists or doctors, these old plastic seats. And then all these equipment with them, with the scissors and the knives and the scrubbing brushes, and you could see the mirror sitting there, and the bath running, the water running in the bath. And the Screw it was doing to me was poking me with scissors. He kept poking me with scissors. And the next thing over his shoulder, I seen the Screw that was doing Tom flying backward. I heard the slap and I seen the Screw flying backwards. Big Tom just stood up and slapped him. So I done the same. I got up and slapped your man with scissors, punched him, and he went down. And of course, what they done, the Screws who was there, they disappeared and the guys came on with it. The thing that I don't remember out of all is this. I can remember hitting the Screws. I don't remember the bidding. But I remember getting thrown on the back of a van, naked, out in the cold, the front yard, the courtyard, getting fired on like a lump of meat, taken to the boards, naked in the back of this van, fired onto a cell. Now the cells and the boards consisted of, incredibly, as we know, heat rises, a heater in the roof, and a concrete bed where you got your mattress on it and you put on top of this concrete bed. And that was it. So I was sitting on there, battered and bruised, and everything, my hair pulled out of me, and stuff like that there. And the next thing, Big Pól Mac Adaim at the door shouting at me, roaring and shouting, defiant as ever. And I was no mood to do a bit of defiant, like, we're a week away from Christmas. and things. They put us on a number. Now I heard a couple of guys on doing another interview saying in early 78 they done away with number one diets. They didn't, because we were putting a number one diet, I remember it. Number one diet would have been black tea and dry bread for breakfast, and then watery soup and black tea for your dinner, and the dry bread and black tea at night. It was the number one diet. It was starvation diet, that's what it was. And come Christmas Eve, out of the goodness of their hearts, the screw says you just getting an amnesty, would be charged with assaulting prison officers and stuff like that. And things, out of the goodness of their hearts, he says, you just getting an amnesty, he's going back to the wing. So we went back to the wing, and I always remember we were walking up the wing and the guy started battering the doors. Big Tom, of course, was shouting and roaring and everything like that, and defiant. Tom was always defiant. Big man, and we were walking up and all the boys was cheering and shouting and things like. So we went down that night, and it was Christmas Eve. We got something to eat, and it was probably the best meal after we starved for over a week that it had since I had went on protest. I was humming a bit of a sing song, and the next thing a screw down at the gate, the bottom gates. Screws didn't really come on the wings at night. Had turned up, and I always remember it was Mary's Boy Child by Bonham. It was number one at the time. Turned it up full blast all over the place for about a couple of minutes of the song. Turned it off again. We knew he was reminding us it was Christmas, right? But of course, all the lads got at the door, and they sang, and they sang, and they sang half of a good night, well on the early hours of the night. They taken me back, sang everything from Christmas songs to rebel songs to everything. More or less, fuck you. We know it's Christmas, fuck you. So, we got past everything, we were on this 1979 then, and as I say, the worst block was H3. H3 was young guys. And it was all the young prisoners were put on there. It was an attempt, they were doing the bring, and they got bittens and bittens. And merciless, some of the worst screws in the blanket was in H3, purposely. And there were animals, guys like a Red Rat, Lorimer, that guy Lorimer, stuff like that there, who the IRA literally executed. And they were animals, and they give them, those young guys, hammers, unbelievable hammers, and they had taken some things, which men, of course, were leaving the protest. Men, you couldn't blame them, they couldn't take it, they were leaving the protest. But we were moved then, in an attempt to break a protest, they had started moving what they call the staff up during the blanket protest. There was H5, H4, H3, H4, H5. They were grouped together. No, H5 and H4 and H3 was across. Now, behind another wall, the H blocks was prisons within prisons. And another section of the jail, you had H2, 1, 2, 3, and 6, 7, or 6. But that was behind another wall, which we were really in a different prison, H6. So they moved them all there, and they moved me and Big Tom along with them. Although we weren't in the staff, they moved us too. And when I reached H6, a screw opened the door, opened the viewing hatch of the door, and he says to me, "Look what you're going to do." And I looked in, and there was this wee man dancing naked, Irish dancing, naked. And it was a guy called Wally Johnson from Belfast. He was mad as hell, crazy. Unfortunately, after he got out, a domestic thing, he was stabbed to death. But the crack was great with Wally. I was next door to Larry Marley and Brian McCall. And as I say, listening to these Larry stories and stuff like that was great and stuff like that. And we had the likes of the Dark, Bobby, were all on that wing. All the main players was on that wing, Shannon Walsh. And I remember within a short time, because it must have been about March, they moved me on with Shannon Walsh at the other side of the wing. Because all I would always remember about Shanna as this night it was snowing. We were sitting with a blanket strapped around us, looking out the windows at the snow, wisping, the orange lights, the snow blowing, furrowing, blowing on the wind and stuff like that, and no sort of things like that take you back, because your mind takes you out of it. You know what I mean? And was deciding, these things sort of, you go elsewhere and you're walking on the snow in your own home, outside your own home, or whatever, in your own street or something like that. And your mind takes you away. And I always remember us standing at the windows looking out. Standing at the window looking out at the snow and stuff like that, doing Michelle and watch. And as I say, I remember I was on the sail with Shanna the famous time when the Bobby Sands got the poems on from Ethnic Yearbury. And it was all her poems, and they had read them and they thought they were fantastic. I've never seen anything like them. If you've ever read Ethnic Yearbury's poems, you'll notice a similarity between her poetry and Bobby Sands' poetry. And later on that night, Bobby got up the door and he shouted in the dark, I wrote a letter out to Ethnic Yearbury. They tell her how brilliant their poems was and stuff like that. And a great man and the dark shouted, well, you better get a little Ouija board out, Bobby, because she's been dead. Over 70 years. Ethnic Yearbury died in 1905. But anyway, she was from up around Ballymena. But she inspired a lot of Bobby's poems. Bobby loved her poetry. She inspired a lot of her poetry. Now, it was at this time then that a guy had left the protest who would have been up there. I'm not going to name the fella. He's deceased and stuff like that. But he would have been up there with Beck and Bobby and the Dark and stuff like that. The lads all idolized him, was a hero. And he left the protest. At the start, they started sending out these, he's a way to get the other guys back again, he's a way to get the other. But gradually men caught on, no, it's not, he's gone. He's not coming back. So men started saying, look, if he can go, we can go. And they started roughing out the protest. You couldn't help them because, they say, especially down in House 3, the fellas was just getting hammered, starved, they made everything. Their food contaminated and everything else, and whatever those animals could think to do against them. And guys was just breaking and going. You couldn't fault them. But as I say, being on the cell with Shanna Walsh, Shanna was telling me everything that was going on, and he told me that they were talking about going on the system. That the Dark had actually turned around and says, look, if we keep going on like this here, men's keep falling, that within a year or so, there's going to be 100 of us left in the protest. We're going to be stuck in the corner of the H blocks and forgot about. Inside jail and outside jail. We can't keep going on like this. They were on about going into the system and breaking it from within, but the only thing stopping them was wearing the prison uniform. We simply could not wear the prison uniform. And at any time that had we got the prison, they got to wear our own clothes at all times, then the protest would have been over. We would have moved that there, the end of the stage, where we would have done the system and wrecked it from within. You know, because we knew the way things was going. We could force the men who led the protest to come along with us. And not only that, we were getting feedback, particularly from screws who were sort of, know what I mean, favourable, and loyalists as well. Because believe it or not, there was actually loyalists selling over tobacco and stuff through the Blanketmen Thomas. Threatening them on their thing to get the thumb at us. There was actually, to be fair, they were doing it. But we were hearing that the loyalists was saying, if these guys comes off the blanket, we're not coming out of our cells. These guys is nutcases, they're crazy, they don't give a damn, right? And they'll be cutting our throats and killing us. So we're not thinking, because, put it like this here, when the loyalist was in jail And I experienced it many a time. I seen us so vastly outnumbered and knocking them in their cells. Because without the British Army and the RUC and the UDR, they were cowards. Shooting kids and people in their beds and stuff. They were cowards. So we knew, and the Dark and Bobby and all, they knew that you could move, when you get moved on that thing like that, we could get what we wanted. But we only needed the clothes. So it was about the clothes. But because we couldn't wear the prison uniform, the only other option opened, and they started discussing then, was the hunger strike. And it began then. Now, come September 1979, we were moved back down the blocks. So they moved us down the blocks, and we were all moved the H3 and Bobby, the Dark. I don't know why they done it, but it sort of kept them all on the same wing. Bobby, the Dark, back, Richard O'Raw, and then I was put on the cell with Bobby. This was the first time I was in the cell with Bobby, or well, the only time I was in the cell with Bobby, and I done, and it was the first time I actually, believe it or not, although I'd been on the wing with him from February, you hadn't really seen him, just flick glances out the side of the door, or thing like match or something like that there, but I was on the cell with him, and I was amazed that he was a great guy, how brilliant he was. He was always thinking, he was walking up and down the cell all day, thinking, constantly thinking. You were sitting there and he would stop and he would write a pot of poems, or he would be thinking about his books, what book he was going to do out the door. And he would have done, his most famous one would have been, he would have done Trinity. You know, Trinity's all about Ireland and stuff like that. He would have done Trinity and all about that. But he had come up with this book, and he called it Jet. He called this book Jet. And like Trinity and all the others, we had always taken it. Now, Bobby had been doing this thing for a long time, these stories, and he would have done them, like episodes every night. And he started telling this story about this guy, he called him Jet. Jet stood for, as far as I can remember, Jeremiah Eisenhower Turnbull, right? And that was his name. His father was a 4-star general in the American Army, and he was expected to go on, but he didn't want to fight. He was conscientious objector. He went to Vietnam. He faked his own death, and he managed to get his way back to America, and he got a Harley, and he took to the roads on the Harley. And his father found out, and he sent this gang after him, motorbiking gang after him, and this was basically what the story was about. And it was only recently where, when I was getting interviewed for Bobby's autobiography, the guy called Dennis Ahern, and he had spoken to me about this book, and it says, when I got out of jail, I'd searched for this book Jet, but I couldn't get it anywhere. And he told me the same. He says, there's other prisoners, it's the same, they searched for it. He had tried everywhere, he used the internet, then was thinking, there was no trace of this book Jet. So we came to the conclusion that Bobby made it up himself. It was a fantastic book. Everybody tell you, it was a fantastic book. And then it was only the last thing that haven't seen like an interview by Danny Devaney, the mural artist from Belfast, who had been in the cages with Bobby, saying that Bobby had been learning the Beatles songs off by heart. And his guitar dawned on me then, Jet by Paul McCartney and Wings. And the words on it, climb on the back and we'll go for a ride in the sky, Jet. But this song must have inspired a story about Jet. And this is where it came from, and the thing about it. So, as I say, and Bobby was always writing, but this day, I had to system about, when Bobby was in the cell with guys, he was in the cell with Malachy Carey, who'd been later murdered by loyalists. And Malachy told them a story about this potty maker called Michael Haddon from County Antrim, and he told them a story, and of course Bobby got interested and he sat down and he started writing, and he came across with that song Michael Haddon and for Malachy Carey. And he had also done the same when he was in the cell with Colin Scullion. He had written him a poem about Toon and everything like. So I says to him, and I said, well, Bobby going to write a song about Derry. We'd write a song about Derry. So he sat down and he would be writing on the walls and letting me see the verse. What do you think is? This is what he used to do. What do you think is? And stuff like that. And he would be asking me about Derry, and I'd say to him about they used to immigrate from Derry and stuff like that. So he came up with a song which he called The Voyage. And it was, he used to tune the wreck of the Evan Fitzgerald. And he called it The Voyage. And of course, Christy Moore, when Christy Moore got it, he already had a song called The Voyage, so he just used the title, which I was back home in Derry. And it became known famously as Back Home in Derry. So, Bobby, and I remember at the time too, Bobby had done a brief. I was in the cell with Bobby for about 3 months, but he had done, Bobby was a prolific writer, which is constantly, when you were lying there sleeping, it's like up and down, and he always stroked his beard, always with his thinking, walking up and down like that, thinking. And I also remember one day I was sitting and he stopped and he says to me, do you see that in the wall, that stain? You know, the walls have been blasted with the power hoses and you could see things. It's like looking at clouds. Do you see, what do you see in that stain? And I says, I don't see nothing. He says, I look a boatman and stuff like that. The man on the boat. We could see something vaguely, like. And Bobby persuaded me I could see a man on the boat. But Bobby sat down straight away and he started writing verses. And he called it The Lonesome Boatman. And the poem's all about this guy who's in the boat on the lake and he's out on his own, and it ends up with a poem, if you read it, that it's only a stain on the wall or a shadow on the wall. You know, I remember us playing and writing this and writing the poem and stuff like that. And I always thought to myself, if someday a musician could get that poem and have the Lonesome Boatman music playing in the background and was he's reciting it, it would be great. I've always suggested to the guys. But anyway, I was then, at this time, I was moved out with Bobby. We were coming to the end of 1979, we were into 1980, it was the beginnings of the hunger strike, and things was just going on. Well, beginning of the year, the first hunger strike, 1980, things was going on in the same vein as they were. It was going on, it was business, especially in H3, the business was bad and stuff like that there. And it was usually the younger guys who were picking on. And I had been moved on then, I was moved on the cell with Jake Jackson. And Jake stood out because while other guys were smoking the Bible, no, using the Bible for, he was reading it from cover to cover and he kept reading it, but he wasn't a religious fanatic or something. Jake would have read anything. But the thing was, he had the Bible off by heart and he used to terrify the priests with. When the priests came on the cell, he used to be quoting the Bible. They asked him, why are you doing with all this money? Why is the church so rich? Why are they telling me? This is what Jesus says in the Bible. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he used to be running out of our cell and stuff like that. And Jake was a very thing. At this time, we could all speak English. The vast majority of people and could speak Irish. We were all fluent Irish speakers, even if some of it was long case Irish. We were all fluent. Everybody used to speak to one another in Irish and stuff like that. Even the guys who were not much Irish knew what was going on and things like this. But then it came to the first hunger strike. First hunger strike started. The men went on it, and as we say, it just became a sort of, it raised the hopes that we could do something. The men wouldn't have to die. We could do something. And at this time, I was still in that wing with Bobby, and Beck and Richard O'Raw and them all. And as it was coming near the end, now, I remember as plain as day that Bobby left coming up the end of that hunger strike. Bobby leaving the wing to go to the prison hospital he was sent for. He was taken out with screws and away he went. Now we were in the cell looking out on the forecourt, where we could see the forecourt leading out on the main gates. And I was in the cell that time by Shimmy Kelly. And hopes were high, we thought it was over, it's great, this is going to be that, it's over, blah, blah, blah. Later on, I remember it was pitch dark, and we seen the van coming back, and I got up the window, and I looked out, and I seen Bobby getting out. Now, Bobby always walked with a bunch, no matter what happened, he always walked with a spring in his step, and his head held high. Bobby's head was down, and his shoulders were slumped, and I slid down the wall, and Jimmy Kelly says to me, what's wrong? And I says, we're fucked. Right, and Bobby came up the wing, and the guys, of course, was whispering, what's crack, Bobby? Get you and Dowie, get you and Dowie. And he kept repeating over and over, neither am I effect, neither am I effect. Now the thing is, that's in every book that documents at that time of Bobby coming back to the wing saying that, neither am I effect. Then he was taken around at the other wings, you know. And this is the thing which mystifies me. Lawrence McKeown saying in the documentary 66 Days that Bobby says that the dark had fucked up. Lawrence McKeown was in hit 6, and as explained to you, which was in a different thing mix. And I had spoken to the guy who was in the cell with him, and the guy told me about this, and the guy told me, he says, look, Bobby thought I was the OC, called me up the door and spoke to me. Lawrence was in the cell with me. I've been in the cell the whole time. He told me what had happened, the hunger strike had fallen apart and everything else, and there was going to be a new hunger strike. He says, when Bobby left, Lawrence asked me what he says, because he was down at the other end of the cell. And he says that when the time Lawrence went on the hunger strike, the time they were moved from hitch 6 up to hitch 3, now they were moved in November after we had been taken. They were moved in November from hitch 4 to hitch 6, that wing, which Lawrence McKeown was on. And they hadn't then moved from hitch, it was when Bobby was well on the hunger strike. He was actually past the stage on his diary where he could write any more. That's when and Lawrence McKeown. So Lawrence McKeown would have never got to talk to Bobby. So coming and saying that Bobby says the dark had fucked up was a lie. And the reason why it's a lie is because that night Bobby started setting things in motion. They started another hunger strike. He was on, and we could hear him talking to Gaelic and the Beck and Richard and Dunley, and they were telling me, I'm going to start this, I'm going to do this, and we're telling me, and he had been round telling the other men. He had actually, from what I found out, he had got names of guys who were saying, we'll go on it, Bobby, we'll get on it. Arun McCreesh and Francis Cusick gave her name that night when Bobby was going around telling him. This is all this night, where the Brits is supposed to have made an offer, right? That day. This Bobby was doing all this. Now if you're to listen to the narrative of some of these guys, and I'm shocked that some of the guys who was on that first hunger strike, given that so many people knows how that first hunger strike ended, are going with a Sinn Féin narrative. The Brenton Hughes took the Brits at their word, accepted the Brits at their word, and accepted that this offer was in the Tibble, and went along with it and ended the hunger strike. That did not happen at all. There was men on that hunger strike. Bobby Sands had actually says the first hunger strike was a fuck up because there was men on it who weren't willing to die. I'm one of those men. I I wouldn't criticise any man come off hunger strike because I wasn't willing to go on it and anything like that. But one of those men was Raymond McKertney. And he was never intending to die. Because I was with his cousin, Sa Gallagher, and the canteen when they were still in the wings. We would have went to the mass on a Sunday, we would have met with each other. And Sa had approached him, and I was with Sa, so be my friends, since we were young guys together in the pros, 16, 17-year-olds. And Sa approached him and says, are you really going to die in hunger strike? And Raymond says, no chance. And I remember going and saying to Jake Jackson, Raymond McKertney's not to say he's not going to die in hunger strike. And Jake Jackson actually says to me, I don't believe that he's not only after, he hasn't only told us, he's telling everybody else. This was about a week into the hunger strike. What had happened, coming up, the Dark had told them he wasn't going to let them die. Right? It's a fact. He had told Sean McKenna he wasn't going to let him die. The Dark had seen them wheeling Sean McKenna. I'd even seen it, people saying that Sean was in outside hospital and stuff like that. He wasn't, they were wheeling Sean out. And the Dark says to him, where are you going, Muhammad? He says, we're taking him to an outside hospital to die. And he says, you're not. We're ending it, feed him. Because 3 men had come to the Dark. Now, Tommy McKertney was going in and out of consciousness, right? And stuff like that there. So, anyway, but 3 men, it says the Dark, look, we're coming off his hunger strike, we're not staying on it. And I've no hesitation, because he's been running with a lie. They've been blaming the Dark, and they've been lying about the Dark. The Brits had never made no offer, there was nothing on the table. They had says we're coming off this hunger strike, and the Dark had says, I'm not going to watch Sean McKenna die and then see this hunger strike fall apart, so he ended it. He was left with no other choice. There was actually a row in the hospital that night when Bobby landed, because Tom McPhilly had said he wasn't coming off it. The Dark says he was staying on it with McPhilly. Right? Now, what had happened then, when the hunger strike was over, Father Mager collected a document at Belfast Airport. We didn't know this at the time, we found this out later. Father Mager had collected a document at the airport, sent over from the British, and he had taken it and given it to Adams. Adams sent it on to Bobby the next day, right? And there was nothing in this document. That document actually says that prisoners could wear prison-type clothing during the working week, or civilian-type clothing during the working week. They didn't renege on that, they tried to pull it on, right? And we threw it out again. It was no different to prison uniform. There was nothing in that document. But when Bobby got it, he says, we can use this against them. We'll say they made an offer. And they reneged on it. Now, I have actually spoken to the other Blanketmen, and I've said to them, do you not remember that, the first hunger strike, that there was about the 3 guys coming out? And he says, I don't remember that, Dixie. That's right. Such and such time me at. All these sinners now that's running with this thing, narrative, was turning around saying, such and such and such and such. Says they were coming off it, and that's what happened. It's now running and saying the Dark took an offer from the Brits. The offer didn't even land, the hunger strike was over, and there was nothing in it. Anyway, common sense will tell you, if you look at it, if the Brits had made an offer that made the Dark end the hunger strike, why would Bobby come back to the wing that night and tell desperate men, right? There was men who had come back on the protest. They were asked to come back to make up the numbers and the hope that the hunger strike would get us something. Why would he come back and tell desperate men, we got nothing, there's a new hunger, send a word out, it's documented, they sent word out that he had started writing a letter that night and he sent it out the next day about a new hunger strike. Why would he do that if there was hope of an offer from the Brits? Why wouldn't he wait and say, look, there's been an offer here, the process made an offer to the heart, we'll wait and see what happens, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing. He knew that the hunger strike had ended because it fell apart, and that's why he changed tactics in the second hunger strike. He says, I'm going on it first, I'm going to die, and he got other men who was committed, and he staggered it out so that there wouldn't be this time a group of men on it, the one time, so one or two started calling off, it might encourage others to come off. That he knew if he died, then it would encourage other men to follow him, which happened. So it all stands to reason. And as the hunger strike went on, Bobby's hunger strike then went on, we know, and this is another thing that's been taken out, didn't they? They had decided, because let's sit and Fermanagh, South Tyrone came up, that they would try, if Bobby was the one that sit, it would be great pressure on Thatcher. She couldn't let an MP die on hunger strike. That's why Bobby took that sit and went on, because they believed they could save his life by winning this election, could save all their lives. That's the only reason. All this shit, Bobby Sands, the MP, and Bobby Sands wasn't intended to be an MP or stuff like that. It was a tactical move. The same as when the guys stood in the south, they put pressure on the government. Here in Doherty, Pat Agnew and stuff like that, won TDs and stuff. It was a tactical movement. But when Bobby won the sit, what it actually done, especially when Bobby died, and 100,000 turned up at his funeral, and then it went on, and the other guys was dying, Francis Hughes and Raymond McCready. What had actually happened was, and the guys then stood in the elections down south, here in Doherty won a seat, Paddy Agnew and Lars Cumbernaby was one on sits. Thatcher, the pressure was on Thatcher, and she seen ahead here was in the by-election for Bobby's seat, and she had known like we need to get this thing. The support that the Provost is getting out of this is unbelievable, and if she was getting pressure, the Free State government was pressuring her, because them guys won on the sits had brought down the government down there, right? So it lost them a thing, mate. So she knew, as I say, that this council election would. But what happened was, on July the thing, mate, Richard O'Rourke, on behalf of the prisoners, had drawn up a statement pulling back from political status, that all prisoners could avail of the 5 demands in the north, and it was released to the public, or in the papers and stuff like that there. The next day, unbeknownst to us at the time, was that Thatcher had started making approaches through. Now, during this time, the Irish Commission on Justice and Peace, who was the SDLP in the church, was talking to the Northern Ireland office, which was only a front, a screen from her. But Thatcher then, through the Home Office, was talking to the mountain climber, Brendan Nutty, to the Provost, which is McGuinness and Adams, the kitchen cabinet, right? Which also included Ted Howe, the famous Ted and McGuinness's or Adams's tweets. They were the things, they were effectively running the hunger strikes from the outside. She had made approaches, and the thing was the most important, which had been the most important demand, which had stopped us going on the system in 1979, was the clothes. And we had only got access to this document during the Richard O'Rourke thing, and we'd seen it when we got it from the Freedom of Information thing, that not only the Thatcher's handwriting was inside, they couldn't deny it. Their handwriting was on the side of their notes, handwritten notes, and it was there. They were giving us our clothes, not as a privilege, but as a right. Plus, a mishmash with the other demands, remission back, and parcels and stuff like that there and stuff. But the clothes was enough to end it. And Richard O'Raw and back passed it up to Richard. Richard looked at it. Now Richard O'Raw was, and we all know that, Richard O'Raw was Bick's advisor. Bick didn't do nothing without putting it through Richard O'Raw. He was the PRO, he was the advisor, a very intelligent man and everything else. And say Bick sent it up and Richard says aye, and they were overheard saying it, the one that tag a lower on, yeah, correct me. There's enough there to finish it. And Bick says to him back in Irish, I'll send word outside the Adams and stuff like that. 2 prisoners in the next cell overheard it, of course, went up the pipes, round the thing, like, the Prince is moving, Joe McDonald's not going to have to die. At the time, everybody was ecstatic, it was great, it was over. Then nothing happened. And we found out later, or whatever, not even then, during the protest, we discovered later when Richard says that, when Richard came out in the thing, because Richard would have had access to this information, whereas we didn't. That was Adam sent word on and says there wasn't enough to end it. Now take that on. The prisoners' leadership, the men on the H blocks had accepted it as being enough because the clothes was the stuff. We knew we could get everything we wanted when we got into that system wearing our own clothes. We could battle it out. Lorne McEwen actually says the thing like they didn't go on after the hunger strike was over, we done the system and we got the rest of the demands through non-physical protest, which was nonsense. There was battles long after over segregation and stuff like that, over work, wrecking workshops and stuff like that. But the thing was, we knew once we got our clothes that the criminalisation policy was broke. The deaths of the first 4 men had broke Thatcher. They had broke her. The people that turned out for Bobby Sands, the people that voted for him, people that voted for down the south, for Kieran Doherty and Paddy Agnew, had broke Thatcher. There was no need for another 6 men to die. But Adams needed the hunger strikes. Obviously, painfully obviously, he needed the hunger strike to be going on. In the August, the second by-election when Owen Kieran was taking the place, was running for Bobby's seat. And if you go through the mountain climbers' notes, even the mountain climbers even looking, even on coming to the end of July, and his notes where he says, the British want the plan to work, but A won't move. A was obviously Adams, right? He says, I'm tired. I can't go on. I can't save Kieran Doherty's life, right? Now, the plan was, and what the Brits wanted to do, was they didn't want to be seen. Of course, this is why the Irish Commission on Justice and Peace was talking to the Northern Ireland office. They want the Brits didn't want to be seen to be negotiating with the IRA or the prisoner stuff. This was the front. They wanted to be seen, to be given in to the church and the Catholic thingmates. The Irish Commission on Justice and Peace says will act as guarantors over any settlement, right? But for some strange reason, as we found out later, Adams pushed them to the side, says they were unpleading things and get rid of them, they pushed them away. And they wanted the, as I say, and actually if you go through, like so, 10 Men Dead, you'll see we're back is writing out the Adams about using the advantages we can, known elections and stuff like that, down south, although the movement's largely against. This is back, men still dying on hunger strike, and this is back writing about elections, talking about taking advantage in all elections. And in Lorne McEwen's book, Nor Meekly Serve My Time, Richard O'Raw had seen this during the whole argument. And as I say, we know Lorne was on hunger strike, and only for Father Fall, Lorne would be dead today. When Father Fall started convincing the families to take them off when they lapsed and they, you know what I mean? Unconsciousness. And but but Lorne had written and nor Weekly shared my time about Adams coming on to visit the hunger strikers with Owen Kieran. Right, now we bring Owen Kieran, and there was these men were sitting there, someone was nearly gone. And he brings this boy standing on elections and they meet them. But Adams says to the men, there's no movement whatsoever from the Brits. If he's keep going, he should be dead and stuff like that. Richard O'Raw, at that time, was forced after these documents was produced. If you remember, Bick had originally says there was no offer whatsoever in interviews, and then he had changed his mind and says that he'd seen an offer which had great potential to end it and stuff like that. So he was effectively saying they'd seen an offer on July the 6th. But there was, in this book, that Adams was telling men there was no movement whatsoever on the Brits, which was actually proof that the hunger strikers had never been told about this offer, and that Adams was lying to dying men. Richard challenged them twice in the papers, and Lorne wouldn't come. Why if Bick's admitting there was movement on July the 6th, was Adams telling them in August there was no movement? Still telling them? Or anything like. But the thing was that that hunger strike went on, and as I say, Mickey Devine died on the same day that Owen Kieran, the last of the hunger strikers, Mickey Devine died on the same day as Owen Kieran won the by-election. Now what is not known, and which I only discovered myself, because I was sent screenshots of the info block from my time, was that 3 days after Owen Kieran had won that by-election and Mickey Devine had died, that Sinn Féin announced that they would be standing in all future elections in the North. And there was advertisement on the info block telling people to register for elections. Now, the movement was largely against, as Mick McFarland says, the movement was totally against elections. And they hadn't got it passed by the RDH. They had announced this without getting it passed by the RDH. They had announced it on the hunger strike where men was still on hunger strike and stuff like that there. And then it was brought up at the RDH at the end of October, which was about 3 weeks after the hunger strikes eventually ended on the 3rd of October. Danny Morrison with his famous Armalite and ballot box speech. Right? So if you look at all these, you can see it coming together. But the hunger strike ended up on about the 3rd of October. The men says that although the hunger strike was ending, it fell apart because of what was happening, because Father Fall got the families to intervene, and as soon as the men was getting bad or their families stepped on and said feed them. Right? No. But eventually, the 3rd of October anyway, at the end of it, he says we're going to go ahead with a blanket protest the following day. But on the 6th of October, John Pryor implemented what had been an offer on the 6th of July. Our close, remission, and association. Work could be done some of the work, but the main things, the hunger strike had fallen apart, but he still introduced what had been an offer all along, what 6 men didn't need to die for. And anybody looking at that will see that those 6 men died. They won Owen Kieran that by-election. Without a doubt, they died, the English. Now the thing is, when I look back, or when I look now and I see them trying to rewrite history, and this is why I says about the first, I wouldn't criticise men for coming off a hunger strike, because I wasn't willing to do it. What I am angry is that Brendan Hughes was the bravest of brave. He was a great leader. He was up there with Bobby Sands and the rest. And I actually believe that it destroyed the rest of Brendan's life. The thought of them men dying and the belief that he should have died too. But the fact that they try to smear that man's name with lies, and I have to say that every time I tell the story, I'll tell the truth. I went round talking to the other Blanketmen, and they all say to me the same thing. Yes, that's right. I remember Pickles telling me about the 3 men coming off. I remember Tomboy. That's right, Tomboy says this too. To me, I remember these ex-Blanketmen I spoke to some as recently as at the weekend there. And we talked it over and they all says, that's right, it's how the end, and everybody knows that. And I say to them, well, would you not wonder why they changed the story, why they're blaming Brendan Hughes? But that's the sinners. I says, yes, but the people that's doing this is rewriting history, and they're rewriting it in such a way that Brendan Hughes is getting the blame for the failure of the first hunger strike when it wasn't him. And that's why I have decided nobody else needs to get named, because the fellas couldn't do it. But Raymond McCartney has lied and lied and lied. He even went on an interview with a Derry Journal and talked about being prepared to die in a hunger strike. He wasn't prepared to die 2 weeks on it. And he wasn't prepared to die coming to end it. And if they want to smear the Dark's name, then I'm going to come out and defend it. Mm-hmm. And that's as simple as it is. Or a thing like. And when I see people now, and they're standing in front of Bobby Sands, his mural, or the likes of Adams' graffiti, Bobby Sands in the background, when he's doing things, when we're selling the betrayal and stuff like that, that the hunger strikers will be supporting the peace process and such like that there. Mm-hmm. What I'm thinking is, they're using these people to ex-hunger strikers and stuff like that to sell the peace process and stuff like that. I have no problem. I know the war's over myself, and I've been an outspoken, as you know yourself, against continuing with an armed struggle and stuff. I have no problem with that, but I'm still getting accused of being anti-peace and stuff like that. It's not anti-peace, it's anti-peace process, which is a scam. It's a money-making scam. It covers up the failures of Sinn Féin and everything else. Their failure to do anything for the people, no matter, even though now they're the largest party in Ireland, they can't even get an Irish language act. But they listen to these people. This is part of the plan. We're moving on, meeting the royal family, toasting the Queen, apologising for the actions of the IRA, the British Military Forces and the RUC. It's all part of moving on, wherever they're moving on to. But the fact of the matter was that these guys can't move anywhere. They're in graves. And they most certainly didn't go into them graves for what is happening today. And when I see guys going on there and talking about ex-hunger strikers with Sinn Féin, about their memories of Bobby Sands and stuff like that there, what they forget is that they're portraying everything that Bobby Sands, and they seem to forget there's 9 other men died. Those other men, including 3A and members of the INLA, that they died for. They're portraying them every day of the week. When they toast the Queen, when they greet Prince Charles, 2 days after the Derry families was told there would be no charges brought against the Paris. During the Ballymurphy inquiry, when John Finucane greeted Prince Charles, when he made an appearance, it's obviously a blind man that these appearances by George, the Colonel-in-Chief of the Paris, was an act of British arrogance at these times. But Sinn Féin was there to play the part. Mm. And then he would go on Twitter and he would go on Facebook and he would remember fond memories of Bobby, blah, 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 blah. And it gets me angry. Mm. Gets me angry. Them guys died incredibly unbelievable deaths, and their families went through hell over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. They didn't do that for peace. None of them went down to jail for peace. It's absurd to say so, and everything else. If they had been alive today, they could be in Sinn Féin. We don't know. We don't know where they were. They could be in Sinn Féin. But they didn't die. They put Sinn Féin where they are today, or anything else. They died for a 32 county socialist republic. And what is Sinn Féin doing now? They have stolen John Hume's Great Ireland. They have went from smash storming in 1981 during the hunger strikes to taking part in things to do with the 100th anniversary of storming and partition. You know, to take part in these events. And when I think back on those days and stuff like that, you know, as I say, you can't say you have fond memories, but I have fond memories of these guys. I've got a set of Pól Mac Adai's rosary beads Pól Mac Adaim gave me. We were very, very close friends. We became close friends because of the business and stuff we talked together. I spent the longest time in a cell with Pól Mac Adaim. And I was with him right throughout, even on the hunger strike. And I was at Mass, and he says to me, look, I've nothing else to give you. And he gave me his rosary beads. I took them rosary beads through the prison system. I took them out, I have them with me, I still have them to this day. I treasure them this day. The man says there's nothing else to give us, he gave us his life.
In Ulster's hills, my life began, a happy boy. Through green fields ran, I kept God's and man's laws. But when my age was barely 10, my country's wrongs were told again by the tens of thousand marching men. My heart stirred to the cause. I wear no convict's uniform, nor meekly serve my time. That Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime. I learned of centuries of strife, of cruel laws, injustice rife, but I saw now in my own young life the fruits of foreign sway. Protesters threatened, tortured, maimed, divisions nurtured, passions flamed, outrage provoked, rights caused to fame. This is the conqueror's way. I'll wear no convict's uniform, nor meekly serve my time. That Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime. Descendants of proud Connacht's clan, Concan serves cruel Britain's hand. Man's inhumanity, the man has spurned this trusty slave. No strangers are these boats and locks, no new design. These dark-aged blocks, cruel Cromwell lives, while Thatcher talks, the bullies taunt to brave. I'll wear no convict's uniform, nor meekly serve my time. That Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime.
Sam Bobby, Anthony Club, Armagh, political prisoner, 35. 492.
Does Britain need 1,000 years of protest riots, death and tears over the last decade of years, being 80 decades swung, and then to Ireland.
My name is Pól Mac Adaim. I'm from the lower falls of Belfast, Leeson Street area. I was arrested in '77 for the third time. I was lost political status. Other times I had political status. This time I was brought into Crumlin Road jail. It was a different atmosphere. Most of the screws or prison officers we knew, or I knew, had been in the prison when I had political status. So basically they knew me and I knew them. When I went to the H blocks, I went up on remand into the H blocks. We were on a protest up there. The abuse was, at the start, it was more them forcing their wills, trying to get us to stand at the door, give our numbers, get things like that, and we just refused, and they took our beds out, left us just with a mattress. We refused to slop out, refused to brush the cells. When I got sentenced, I was brought up to H4. I refused to wear the prison uniform. The principal officer at the time I knew, he'd been a prison officer in Crumlin Road when I'd been there in the early 70s. When I got onto the wing, I was put into a cell on my own. There was a lot of prison officers knocking about the circle when I first went in. It was like a welcoming committee, but I was marched down to the cell. There was a chamber pot which was filthy. It hadn't been cleaned in ages, belonged to somebody else. Prison officers just growled at you. There was prison orderlies who couldn't lift their head to look at you, didn't speak. Door opened, slammed, in came the food. It was minimal. I mean, basic, cold prison food. It was worse than anything I'd ever experienced in prisons. Was it deliberate? Yeah, I found that out to my cost. It was, you got a mug of tea, you got half a fish, you could count the chips on your plate, 4 or 5. You could actually count the peas, 4 or 5 peas, and this was deliberate. The tea was absolutely, oh God, stinking, undrinkable. I sat there and I ate what I could, and the door opened again. I was told to put, when I finished my food, to put my plate at the door by a guy in the next cell, and that's what I did. And I sat there, blanket wrapped around me, talking to him. The door opened, they lifted the plates and cutlery out, and away they went. That was it until lockdown, and then screws left the wing, and the wing became a bubble. I mean, just a hub of noise. It came to life. It was extraordinary, to be honest, what was happening, people talking and things, and then all I heard was shinny, shinny. And it was our commanding officer on the wing, and he went through talking to people, different things. It was all done in Gaelic, and I had no Gaelic at the time, didn't know what was happening. And then he asked me in English to just give my story from entering the block till, well, from being sentenced coming up, and any news I had. So I gave the story out, relayed what had happened to me, what was said to me by the prison, what happened when they came into the cell, and all I heard, couples going, lucky bastard, because I didn't get a beating. Apparently it was norm for prisoners to get a beating. I'd give all the news that I could answered questions about people who were still on remand, brothers of some of the prisoners and things like that. Just answered any question, football, top of the pops, anything musical or thing. Just asked questions, mainly about their families on the outside, what was happening, what about the protests, about the blanket, what was happening on remand, what was the feeling on remand. They were just starved of any news. And it struck me these guys were in their cells 24 hours a day, no newspapers, no reading material, no insight to what was happening outside of their own cell or own wing, just totally deprived of any form of communication except once a month with their families, which was monitored by prison officers. Going through the H blocks, my first wing shift was a horrendous experience. I was taken out of my cell, put over a mirror, told to squat. There was 4 or 5 prison officers around me. 2 of them were holding my arms. I refused to squat and I was standing, and the next thing, 2 of them kicked the back of my knees and down you went, and they were pressing down on your shoulder. And then you had one of them who was pulling your cheeks open to look inside your renal passage. I was horrified. It's what they wanted to do was to horrify you. It was to degrade you. I got punched and kicked. What's your number? I don't have a number. Face pushed up against the wall. 2 screws holding me and 1 pressing my head, my face into the wall. Taken over run over basically to another wing, put into the same cell, only in a different wing. And waiting, and then you heard people getting beat and punched and kicked. You could hear the groans and the moans of it. Some got worse than others, which seemed to be a tactic. The younger prisoners were picked on. It later became true that that's what their tactic was. It was to pick on younger prisoners, to try and isolate them, beat them harder than they physically abused the older prisoners. And as I say, subsequently we found out this was a designed tactic. Going through the prison, I got my first hosing down. It was one night, prison officers come in and we're locked in our cells, and they put a fire hose basically that was at the end of the wing, and I was told to lift my blanket or my mattress, put it up on the pipes and stand protecting your mattress as best you could, because that's what you were sleeping on. The hose come underneath the door or up the side of the door where there was a slight gap, and the hose then till there was about 3 or 4 inches of water on the floor, and then they moved on to the other cells and continued. And then brushed out the wing, and they used some type of chemical, don't know what it was, but God, it attacked you, it attacked your senses, your smell, your throat, your chest, your eyes were running, and apparently I've been told then that this could happen nightly for weeks, or it could be just spontaneous. It was at the will of whatever prison officers were on, and just depending what they wanted to do to you. And this subsequently happened continuously for my time on the prison, in the prison and on the H blocks and on the protest. My first visit down with my family was again down to the big cell, put on a prison uniform. If you didn't put the prison uniform on, you didn't get a visit. Down, you weren't allowed to go in the buses to the prison, you had to walk. You had no laces in your boots. The uniform you had was shabby, buttons missing off it, rips in it, down round, just hanging off you. You walked the length from H4 to the prison, which was probably about a mile, half a mile maybe, I don't know, but it was a long walk. If it was a punishment, it didn't work, because it was the only time you were out of your cell. It was the only time you could see in the distance, see birds, see fresh air, and basically you just took your time and you walked. Sometimes the school would say, hurry up, push you, move you on. You just took your time, you just sauntered along and took your time. You seen other prisoners on the other side. They weren't allowed to talk or talk to you. We nodded or waved. Just didn't let them through see you doing it, but we communicated. Brought into the visits, and I can remember my family's shock at the pallor of my face only after a week or two on the protest. The beard, the hair matted, and I would take it, the stench. The stench in the H blocks was horrendous when you first went in. A mixture of chemicals and body fluids and things, it just was horrendous. My first experience of, I would say, psychological abuse was when I first got my first letter from my family, and it was blacked out on page, just for no reason. It was just blacked out. A page was missing completely from the letter, and this was the norm. This was another way of refusing to let you communicate or have communication with your family. Letters were totally censored and in a random way. It wasn't because there was anything in them, it was just whoever was in the centre just got a black marker and just made it illegible on parts, just to let you know they had power and control over you. The abuse coming in, I know where your wife lives, I know where your daughter, you heard it constantly. We'll get your family, don't you worry about it. We'll give your details to the UDA or to the UVF. We have their addresses, and we'll pass these on. People were worried at the time. The collusion with the RUC at the time was rife, and people were getting murdered on the outside by murder gangs who were colluding with the forces at the time, and it was, people were worried about it, but these threats were constant, so it was a psychological abuse. Medical care, my first experience of a doctor coming onto the wing was the door opening, I would say about that much, and slammed shut, and I moved on. And you could hear this going right round the wing, and just going round and straight out. It lasted for about, how long it took them to march up the wing and out again, 3 minutes. I had to ask what was going on, because just out squeal was burn the air, and I'm saying, what is this, what's happening? Somebody says, oh, it's just a doctor coming around. And I said, but he couldn't even see inside the cell. You'll get used to it. The next one was where the governor come round to do adjudications, in other words, to take remission off people. Sentences for loss of remission, loss of tuck shop, loss of privileges. And when we were protesting prisoners, most of us, not most of us, some of us were life prisoners, and this idiot was coming into your cell and saying, he's taking remission off you. And people were, they just looked down, we didn't even speak to them. Everybody in the wing were banging their chamber pots off the door, making as much noise as they could, just making a nonsense of it. It was, because that's what it was a total and utter nonsense. An assistant governor just coming around, and maybe they thought they were frightening you by taking remission of you, but as I say, if you were a life prisoner, remission didn't count. And by virtue of the fact that you were on the protest, you weren't worried about your remission. And it was just a total nonsense. Again, power and control they had over you. Medical care in the H blocks was basically non-existent. You had a prison officer in a white coat who would dole out medication. But to get that medication, if you were seriously ill, and most prisoners didn't go to the doctor to get medication for fear of being beat. Our cells, once we were inside our cell, it was like a haven. Once you were outside that cell, you were at the hands and at the mercy of bigots and drunken prison officers. These people went away at lunchtime, come back at tea time, and you could smell the alcohol off them. Coming around, that's when it was most dangerous in the H blocks. When these people got out, they got into the clubs in the prison. There was 2 of them. The prison officers' mess and the sergeants' mess, which was the British Army one, which was all subsidised. Governors probably drank with them. Doctors we know drank with them. So it was a case of, these were ex-British soldiers. There was one ex-B special that I know of who was in the prison service. There was ex-police officers, as they're so called, and a lot of bigots who were from the Shankill, Sandy Row, who were members of the prison service. We were well aware of them, we knew them, and some people had worked with them. So we knew what type of people they were. They took it upon themselves to degrade, sexually abuse, and beat prisoners. One guy in particular who was on, that I can remember, who was on appeal visits and was on another wing in H4 with me, was singled out by one particular prison officer, and every time he had an appeal visit, this screw took him on a visit. He got beat from the minute he came out of his cell. That prison officer was there. Beat him when he came out of the cell, beat him when he was putting on the prison uniform to go on the visit, beat him down, put down the yard, gone out, and beat him down to his visit. I seen this, I witnessed it. And this was constant. When he come back from the visit, was coming up the yard, your mum was still beating him, still punching him, pulling his hair and calling him names. The famous one from them all was, these are only animals and we're going to treat these like animals. You're nothing but smelly Fenian bastards. I mean, all the stupid bigot remarks that came out. When we were doing Gaelic classes, you'd get them coming up making stupid noises like children, blah 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 blah, stupid bad language, stupid this, stupid language. To be honest, it just made us more determined to learn the language. We were looking at these people. We knew some of them couldn't read nor write. They were just idiots, they were bigots and thugs, but they were given free rein to attack us, and they did. They were bullies, but when they came in and put on that uniform, they had a gang round them and they were able to bully prisoners and beat them. The food in the H blocks, as I touched on, was reduced. They had control of it. They didn't feed you. The food was left to go cold before it was served to you. And subsequently we learned that in H4 in particular, that they had an orderly and his party trick was to urinate into the tea urn. And that was served up to the prisoners. We also knew that at times there was air fresheners and fly killers spread on the food deliberately. So this was handed out to us, and we had to survive on this. As I say, some of us have medical conditions because of it, and some of us have psychological problems because of it. Toxic cleaning, I mean, it was sporadic. We didn't know what they were using, but you were gasping for air. You were hanging on the grill that was over your your window. We had no windows in the cell, no glass in it. It was just a box we couldn't see out. There was a box outside and a wire grill on the inside. It was horrendous when you got this toxic cleaning. Now you can see that the conditions we were living in was putting excrement on the walls, emptying our urine out the door, getting physical and mental abuse, and this had been going on for near 5 years. Prisoners had come to the end of their tether, and we were constantly having discussions among ourselves of where we could go and what we could do. And one of the things come up which was inevitable and has been proven that a hunger strike would be our only option. It was discussed on every wing, and it was decided that the first hunger strike would take place. Brenton Hughes, who was the OC of the prison at the time, led the first hunger strike, along with the officer commandant in the wing I was in. He went on the hunger strike along with the others, and it was, we had no idea, being locked in our cells, having no television, radios, or any communication or access to any media or anything. We were dependent on our own families and people from the Falls Road Centre coming up on visits and telling us what was happening, what protests were taking place and how many were at it. Some people of good intention told us lies, told us there was hundreds of thousands out on the street, when in actual fact there wasn't. But we were on the impression at times, but as I say, it was families trying to keep our morale up. In the end, I think it was us keeping the families' morales up. We were totally determined on where we were going. The hunger strike progressed. The first hunger strike, we were constantly waiting on what was happening. And young McKenna was going blind, and it was near death. And Brenton Hughes, as again, who's remained the officer commandant, was put in a position that he should never have been put in, and neither should the hunger strikers at the time been put in. And they had to make a decision. And they were told that there was an agreement, and that if they didn't take this agreement, young McKenna would die. Brenton Hughes, as I say, was weakened from his own hunger strike, who was isolated in the extent in the prison hospital from any group. The rest of them were hunger strikers and I'll say in a weakened state. And rather than see young McKenna die, he took a decision that he would accept the word of the NIO or the British government, as we thought, that we would receive political status through the back door. We came off the hunger strike, we were told that this was coming. We were sent out to our families and asked for our own clothes to be sent up to the prison. Parcels were sent up, food parcels, and they were refused. It became quite clear that they had reneged. They thought by reneging they would break the spirit of the prisoners and their resolve. I can't understand their thinking on that, but that's, in my belief, that's what they thought. Bobby Sands sent a communication round after a week or two and stated that British have basically reneged on their promises. They give the political parties on the outside the chance to negotiate on our behalf, and the Catholic churches and anybody who was interested in human rights to talk to the British and talk to the NIO. It didn't work. Bobby sent this communication round and said that another hunger strike would take place and that he would be leading it. And basically he stated that he knew he was going to die, and he was prepared to die, and that anybody who was going to put their name down for hunger strike must have it in their head that they're not going to survive, they're going to die. Looking back on it, it was probably one of the bravest things I've ever heard or seen or participated in. It shook you to the core. The strength of the man and the resolve, the bravery was just overwhelming. Discussions took place on the wing. It was agreed, it was taken on a vote that the hunger strike would continue. People put their names forward, and an awful lot of people put their names forward, brave men. The hunger strike started. The president of us just constantly, he's going to die. You're never going to see him again, he's dead. Making jokes and slagging and just derogatory remarks and anything that we mean young men could think of. Continuously the psychological abuse and not so much the physical abuse, but they carried on with the food. Just again, with nothing there. They play the game of giving 2 plates into a cell, one full of food and the other one not, hoping that it would cause division within the cell. It didn't, because we shared our food. We were that type of people. And I mean, everything that they tried, we counteracted because of who we were, and because of what we believed in. We lived through a state that had constantly deprived us of human rights and civil rights. So I mean, this was just a continuation of it as far as we're concerned. We fought against it on the outside, and we were doing it on the inside. As I say, Bobby had wrote the column. We had done discussions, and one of the discussions was that this wasn't just to break the prisoners in the H block. This was to break the Republican movement on the outside, to criminalise the struggle for Irish freedom. And those of us in the prison, we were victims of this, and we didn't want it happening on the outside. We didn't want our war to be criminalised. We were politically motivated. We wanted freedom. We were patriots, and this is, we were fighting a bigger colonial state that was set up by the British, who give free rein to loyalists to do what they want on the Catholic population, economically and physically. And when you look back on it in '69, it wasn't the Catholics that started. It was prior to that. You had the UVF starting the war. They continued, and it went right through '69, where they were burning out Catholics. It happened after generation after generation. And then we see it recently where they're trying to start it up again. We had it there in Larnack Way where loyalist Jews were, I don't know, honestly they're only children, but they were motivated to attack Catholic area. They broke through the barrier, and if it had got further on, the Republic burnt out Catholic houses. Only Catholic Jews retaliated, and then the PSNI stepped in. This so-called police force, and fired plastic bullets at them and used water cannons on them. Up until then, they'd never been used, yet loyalists had been rioting, and it was loyalists attacking Catholics again. But once Catholics come out on the defence, we had it. We had these people coming attacking Catholic youths. In the H blocks, we understood this. We grew up with this. We went through it. We see when the British Army come in, they weren't attacking loyalists, they were attacking us. It was no way were we going to let republicanism or the war on the outside be criminalised. And we were very, very determined on that. The hunger strikes continued. Bobby was constantly sending comms to back and forth. He was meeting with Bick McFarland, who had took over as OC, and Bick was relaying the messages back to us, and we were receiving communications on how the hunger strikers were doing. We were writing letters out to reporters, to anybody, I mean literally the doctors, anybody, to ask them to highlight our situation. We know for a fact that in the Ulster news rooms that they were laughing at mistakes and spellings and things like that. They were from a unionist background, so it wasn't that we expected anything, but we thought there might have been some humanity in them. Obviously not. We again, after we found out that in 1975 the British had decided they were going to take away special category status, that they knew there would be people, that the Republicans would riot within the prison, that would damage the prison, that would refuse to wear the prison uniform, that would refuse to do prison work, and that they would go on hunger strike. Labour Party backed this up and agreed to it, and they agreed that they would let prisoners die, hunger strikers die. I don't think they realised how long the prison protest was going on for. I don't think they realised that there would be 10 men died. But this is what they did. They knew this and they were prepared to do it, just to criminalise the war and to criminalise the prisoners. This is what we were up against. We were fighting a state, a British colonial state that still exists. And these are the people who are still in power and who still rule our everyday lives. We fought within the prison, we used our bodies, and as I say, the hunger strikes went through. We lost absolutely fantastic people, very intelligent people, and very kind and honest people.